Okay, I call to order the meeting of Mayor and Council. Thank you so much for being here tonight. If you will rise for the invocation by Councilman Henderson.
Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful and kindle in us the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit, and we shall be created, and you shall renew the face of the earth. O God, who by the light of the Holy Spirit did instruct the hearts of the faithful, grant that by the same Holy Spirit we may be truly wise and ever enjoy his consolations. Through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Standing for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, seated. Okay, do we have any changes to tonight's agenda?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay, you've all received the minutes from our last meeting. If there are no corrections, adjustments, or comments, I'll accept the motion to receive the minutes.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
We have a motion from Councilman McCoy. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Holland, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. All right, first up, we have public comment. Ms. Jessica, do we have anybody listed for public comment tonight?
We do. First on the list is Dan Cannon of 411 Highland Boulevard.
Okay, Mr. Cannon?
Dan Cannon, 411 Nylon Boulevard, Seaford. As you know, the Delaware General Assembly has unanimously passed a law which mandates that, quote, meetings of public bodies must provide an opportunity for public comment, unquote. Of course, all the other municipalities, this public comment legislation was no big deal. However, to the best of my knowledge, Seaford had remained the only municipality in the state of Delaware not allowing public comment at meetings until forced to do so by Delaware's General Assembly. Was this General Assembly action concurrent with the Chancery Court ruling against Seaford's Field Remains Ordinance just a coincidence? In my opinion, the General Assembly sent yet another, not so subtle, warning and message to a wayward city of Seaford. Lack of public comment in Seaford was un-American and the antithesis of the spirit of governance of, by, and for the people. Other municipalities in Delaware likely consider citizen input as a vital check on the actions and activities of both elected and appointed officials supposed to be responsive and responsible to its citizens. In contrast, Seaford's rejection of public comments as checks on dubious decision-making has not worked out well for the city. For example, over the last 6 or 7 years, the city of Seaford has been found guilty of at least 6 violations of FOIA laws, violations of several election laws, an attempt to establish an illegal right-to-work ordinance, and recently, an attempt to establish an illegal fetal remains law. There were no opportunities for citizens to address Seaford's mayor and city council with public comment about these snafus and others at considerable cost to Seaford's reputation, not to mention its bank accounts. In the past, Mayor Genshaw and the slim majority of the City Council have, in the main, disregarded and even expressed antipathy towards citizens with contrarian views, like me. Now the success of public comment in Seaford will strongly depend on elected and unelected officials respecting the new law by showing good faith acceptance and utilization of this form of public input. Can or will tigers change their stripes? Well, time will tell, and the truth will out. As a demonstration of good faith, I would ask, will you withdraw the illegal fetal remains ordinance? Will you? Will you disclose the identity of the anonymous donor who offered to fund Seaford's pursuit of illegal fetal remains ordinance? Will you? Take steps to increase voter turnout in municipal elections by moving the elections to the date of state and federal elections.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon.
Will you?
Appreciate your comments. Do we have anybody else for public comment tonight?
We have a Mr. J. Dolby of Seaford signed in.
Is that for the public hearing? Yes. Okay. Is there anyone else?
No, that concludes.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. So that'll end our public comment. I do want to just comment on one part of what was said tonight, just so the public has a clear understanding, is that the city of Seaford was not accused of doing anything illegal by the Attorney General or the judge in either one of those cases. So I never want our public to think we're doing something illegal. So just want to clarify that. Okay, next, we have any correspondence tonight?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay, then we'll go ahead at 7:05 and close our regular meeting and open up our public hearing. I'll call up our building official, Mr. Mike Bailey.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Just one item on tonight's public hearing for myself, and that is for Mr. J. Dolby, and they're requesting a rezoning of 3.828 acres of land from the current zoning of R1 to R2, to C2, and a rezoning of 6.795 acres from C2 to R1. This property is located at 22347 Sussex Highway, tax map and parcel 331-4.00-24.00. Here's the area in question out there. It's at the corner of Old Furnace and Route 13. It's a large farmland now. And this is a snapshot of the future land use map from the most recent comprehensive plan, and I've got it enlarged there on the right-hand side showing that parcel, the red section being C2, and the yellow behind it is residential, commercial and residential. And that straight line there is what they're looking to massage this evening, and I got some better pictures of that. And this is the current zoning map. C2 is the brown color there, and the R1 is the bluish, purplish color there on that same straight line there. So this is the plan that we received. This is the full-size version there. I did, on the next slide, have it enlarged so you can better see what they're looking to do. The blue area on the top is the proposed rezoning from R1 to C2, and that's plus or minus 3.828 acres. The red area below that is the rezoning from C2 to R1, and that's plus or minus 6.795 acres. And this is to better suit a proposed subdivision that will be coming down the road for this property, better suit the land use there instead of that straight line. They can better work some residential lots in this and a road to separate the two. And both of the areas do meet the area and bulk requirements for the proposed new zonings. Mr. Dolby is here, as well as the engineering company as well, if there's any questions.
Okay, are there any questions from council?
I do.
Councilman Henderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When you change the bulk area of zones like that, does it require the input of the Office of State Planning in any way?
Yes, sir, you're correct, but we actually assigned, and Mike pulled it out and reviewed it, an MOU with them. Council approved it, help me out, Mike, 2 years ago?
Yeah, it was in coordinates with the comprehensive plan.
So minor changes such as this, we have the authority to approve. Council has the authority to approve, not staff, just so.
Yeah, if we were rezoning the entire parcel, we would have had to go to them for
Okay,
that.
all right, thank you.
Good question. Any other questions from council? Are there any questions or comments from the public? Okay, we're going to go ahead and close our public hearing at 7:09 and reopen our regular meeting.
So this is public hearing number 1 for A.J. Dolby requesting a rezoning of 3.828 acres of land from the current zoning of R1 to C2 and a rezoning of 6.795 acres from C2 to R1. Property is located at 22347 Sussex Highway, tax map and parcel 331-4.00-24.00, and both these areas do meet the area and bulk requirements for the proposed new zonings, Planning and Zoning did make a favorable recommendation to council for approval on July 7th.
Okay, I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Holland, I make a motion to approve the request of A.J. Dovey for a rezoning of 3.828 acres of land from current zoning of R1 to C2 and rezoning of 6.795 acres from C2 to R1. Property located at 22347 Success Highway, tax map and parcel 331-4.00-24.00 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman Holland. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Councilman McCoy seconds. Okay, are there any questions on the motion? If not, we'll do a roll call based on findings of facts. Councilman Holland,
Yes, based on findings of facts.
Councilman McCoy,
Yes, based on findings of facts.
Councilman King,
Yes, based on findings of facts.
Councilman Santos,
Yes, based on findings of facts.
and Councilman Henderson.
Yes, based on findings of facts.
Okay, great job.
Thank you very
Mike.
much.
Thank you, Dolby's. Appreciate it. All right, we'll move on to new business number one. We're going to call up Mr. Sims. Thank you, Mr. Dolby. To present the first reading to amend Chapter 6.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Charles, do we read all of the changes, or we just want me to highlight what the main points are and see if there's any questions?
Unless council disagrees, I would suggest Mr. Sims give the background and the genesis of how we arrived here, and then just basically hit the highlights of the changes, because this is a rather voluminous
Yeah.
code section. So, yes. Thank you, Chris.
As a result of Senate Bill 298 that was just passed this year, they made some pretty significant changes to the net energy metering rules and regulations in the state of Delaware. And even though we're not regulated by the Delaware Public Service Commission in terms of our rates, we have followed the standards that they've put in place. It was probably about a dozen years ago. Back then, they set the limit at 5% of the peak load for the town was allowed to be installed behind the meter generation. And so the makeup of the city, that 5% limit was met pretty quickly within the first 2-3 years of it being available. And it's largely due to the fact that there were a significant number of commercial applications. So there's roughly today about 1,250 megawatts of behind-the-meter generation from renewable resources like solar. And that's made up of only 20 customers. So the Senate Bill 298 is increasing that threshold from 5% of the wholesale peak load up to 8% of your wholesale peak load. And so the city of Seaford's wholesale peak load right now is about 20.6 megawatts. So that means if we take the 8% from there, we would be roughly allowed to have 1,650 kilowatts, or 1.65 megawatts, would be allowed to be behind the meter generation. And so since we have 1,250 in place today, that's roughly another 400 kW worth of behind the meter generation that could go into place. And if it is commercial, that could be easily taken up with 1 or 2 applications, but there are 3 that are currently in the queue. They've been in the queue for several years. Not sure if they're still going to be interested in it. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. But a typical residential one is about 10 kW. So we could be looking at, if it was all residential customers, then we would see about another 40 or so installations that would be allowed to be put into place.
Mr. Bailey, are you the one who keeps the list of clients that wanted potential net metering, and we keep that list?
Mr. Bennett does.
Mr. Bennett does. Is that how we would do it, go through the list, and, top down for who's been on it the longest? If they say, no, we don't need it, we move to the next, and is that the process? I'm sorry to put you on the spot like that, just trying to.
That's why I asked him to be here.
Yes.
Yes, the people were told as they went on the queue, once anything became available, we would start at the top. Some of them have been on there since like 17 or 18.
Okay.
So they've been on there 4 or 5 years. So who knows if they still want to,
Right.
to go on. So yes, we would contact them from the first one down to the one who called me today. There's been a few added to the list over once this came out about them possibly raising it and they were pushing renewable again, in the last month and a half, we've gotten quite a few calls. I think there's 10
Okay,
on the list right now.
okay.
So,
All right, thank
we-
you for that update.
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, Councilman King.
Yeah, thank you, sir. While we're talking about the list, so is it residential, commercial, mixed? Is it first come, first serve? And the reason I'm asking, let's just say hypothetically, a Walmart says, hey, I want to do this. And then they automatically deplete that threshold. And then it doesn't give you a residential, to your point, you alluded to the amount that a resident would use as kind of minimal. And so you could do a lot of residents versus you could have a couple large commercial facilities that eat away at that very quickly. So is there just first come, first serve, or is there an equation to that, or what does that look like?
well, they were told when we started the queue back in 16 or 17 that it would be first come, first serve. Presently, all the ones on the list are residential.
All right, good.
Thank you.
But maybe to take that further, Councilman, our policy that creates the list and how we'll react to the list, the council actually adopted that. It does not subdivide out and say we'll have so many megawatts from residential and we'll save so many for C&I customers, commercial, industrial. So we do not, the policy does not dictate a subdivision as you referenced.
Sure. It's just first come, first served basis.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Bennett?
Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
And to add to that as well, so when you're talking about somebody as large as a Walmart, technically they could install solar if they wanted to, we'll get to a different part, talking about 20% penetration limits, but setting that aside for a second, they could still install solar, it's just they wouldn't get the benefits of net energy metering, meaning
Right.
we would leave the meter to read unidirectionally, so it only reads power delivered to the city. So if there's a time of day where they are exporting power to the city, they wouldn't get any credit for that kilowatt hours. So they technically wouldn't be a net energy metering customer. They would just have their own behind-the-meter generation. So they have that option, but nobody is elected to go that route because typically, you would install enough that in the summertime, there's some hours
Sure.
that you are providing power to the city, and so you would get the kilowatt-hour benefit of that
Okay.
going forward.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Mhm.
Appreciate that.
Yes.
I didn't mean to interrupt in between there. Were you through with what you were presenting there? I didn't mean to interrupt.
So that was just the first
Okay.
part is that was the one major change was going from the 5% to the 8% limit. And so additionally, since they are increasing that threshold, the state has also elected to change the payments for any net excess credits that are available at the end of the year. So if the customer was able to produce more power on an annual basis than they actually utilized at their facility, then they would have essentially a negative kilowatt-hour credit balance at the end of the year. And typically, you wait until after the winter period to make sure. So it resets every April or so, roughly, each year. And with the city of Seaford, there's only one of the 20 customers that has overproduced regularly on an annual basis. And the reason there's only one is because there's a different rule that they're not changing, that when you go for an installation, the maximum you're allowed to put in terms of capacity is so that it's estimated to produce no more than 110% of your annual consumption. So it was intentionally put there so that you don't significantly oversize the equipment, because the exporting of the power onto the grid is what destabilizes essentially the power flows and things of that nature. So you want to avoid that to a large degree. And the city of Seaford had taken it one step further and just limited it to 100% as opposed to 110%. But that is one change that we are going to make this year, is to put that 100% up to 110. So the customers technically could have a 10% more output from their solar than they actually use that year. So at the end of the year, they could have a negative 300 kilowatt hour credit. And so the change this year is that those credits essentially will go to the utility and the city of Seaford for essentially implementing this program. So rather than cutting a check to the customer for the negative 300 kilowatt hours times the DMEC rate, essentially, because they would get credited based on the avoidance of wholesale purchases, instead of that, it's going to, the town will essentially just put that credit balance back to 0 kilowatt hours and go forward. And that's what I'm saying. The state is allowing for the utilities to retain those credits to utilize to administer these programs. And the last significant change is typically it was, well, before it was entirely on the utility to provide any new metering for these customers that wish to be interconnected and have a bidirectional meter. They have since changed it to a residential customer. It's essentially free up to the first $200 in cost for the meter to the customer. So the utility pays the first $200, and then after that, it goes to that's a customer's expense. So if the customer requests, if it's a more tricky situation, I guess, to provide the metering for that customer, they're responsible for anything above $200, and a commercial customer is responsible for any new metering. There's no $200 threshold there. So before, the city was the one responsible for all of the metering equipment differences to put in a bidirectional meter if it needed to be. We don't see this essentially having any impact because all meters today are digital meters that typically you can just reprogram it to read both ways. It's not a physical meter that needs to be replaced in 99.99% of the cases. But if there is one that comes in, if it's commercial, they pay entirely for it, and if it's residential, the city pays the first $200. And the last part is, since they are increasing that limit up to 8%, there begins to be a concern on how much of that behind-the-meter generation is concentrated on one distribution circuit. Because like I said, you don't want to be in a scenario where there's one circuit that is got negative power flows going in the reverse direction, because it significantly affects harmonics and things of that nature. So they put in language that will allow for the utility, in this case the city, to develop rules to protect the safety and the operational integrity of the equipment that's in place. And so the city here is planning to adopt a methodology that Delmarva Power utilizes, and they have for many years now limited any one distribution circuit. There cannot be more than what we call a penetration level, meaning the behind-the-meter generation maximum capacity cannot be more than 20% of the peak load on that circuit. So, because that you don't, like I said, you don't want to have a scenario where that one circuit, there's 1 megawatt of behind-the-meter generation, but there's typically only 500 kW of load. You're going to be exporting power a significant amount of time. Mm-hmm. So what Delmarva Power did is they limited it to, if that load is typically 1 megawatt on that particular circuit, distribution circuit, they would limit the maximum behind-the-meter generation to be at 20%, so 200 kW. And, in this case, really the only circuit where that would probably come into play right off of the bat would be the circuit that includes the solar farm for the city that offsets the wastewater treatment facilities load, because it's virtually aggregated, so it's not connected to the wastewater treatment facilities load, so it's not behind that meter, even though it doesn't produce more power than the wastewater treatment facility utilizes in a year. But on that one particular circuit, the only load that's there is some cameras and lights and things of that nature. So it's a very small amount of load for a large amount of output. So customers that want to connect to that circuit would, it would likely require additional review, depending on the size. And so that's where in this net metering policy statement, we're suggesting to utilize that same 20% threshold, but it doesn't say that they cannot connect if it's over 20% penetration. What we're saying is it will likely require additional review, and that additional review would be at the cost of the customer. And if there are upgrades that are required, it would be, again, on the customer. And so that's largely, if we do have somebody like a Walmart that wants to put something behind the meter and it requires a significant change, it would be at their cost. So those are the 5 main changes that are essentially being codified into the rules and regulations as the Senate bill put forth.
And we do not need a vote on that. That's just,
Yes, sir, this is a first reading, so it'll come back at the next meeting for a second reading and potential adoption should council want to move forward.
okay, does council have any questions on all of that information? Councilman Henderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. Sims.
Good evening.
My understanding is that we're already over 5%. Is that correct?
We are.
So we're almost to 8.
I think we're just above 6.5, Bill. would
Yeah,
have to-
that's what I was saying. So at the 8% threshold, there is about an additional 400 kW that could be put into place.
Right. So when you reach the 8, and that puts, we're at 20 megs now per day, average load,
Mhm.
right?
Peak. Peaks.
Right.
Peak
yes.
for the year. Mhm.
So what happens when you have a slowdown and you go to 18 and you're at 8 and then all of a sudden you go up to 10%?
Well, what you're describing actually occurred. Because there's 2 factors. We were running at 23 megawatts. I'm looking at
Right.
Bill for a while.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
that's why we're at 7.5 or 7 now.
It's a
because
contributing factor.
We were at 5, but our load went down. And so what happens in a regulatory way? You got people in the queue, you got people that are investing in these systems.
So every year, we evaluate that peak. And we evaluate this penetration, saturation of the system.
Right.
So if those numbers change, it becomes closed. The scenario you're
Okay.
describing, it would become closed for a period of time, till growth occurred, till someone took the system off. There's a ton of scenarios that could unfold.
So
but
it gets trued up on an annual basis?
No, it doesn't. I mean, there would be no reduction. I mean,
Right.
just because this is what the maximum capabilities of the system are, in all likelihood, there's a 0.5% degradation each year on their systems itself. So in all reality, they're probably not even producing the full 1,250 kW at one exact given hour. So I think that's why they allow for some fluctuation. Now, granted, 2020 was unprecedented. Yeah, the peak load did go down about 4 or 5 megawatts almost in the course of 1 year, but it bounces back pretty quickly.
Yeah, but that's my point. Like, if you have to look at it every year and say, well, I'm at 21 this year, I'm at 20 this year, I'm at 22, that's a floating number, and then you're moving in and out of your 8% cap, and people are signing contracts.
It's difficult, and we look at this number, this peak number, we do the calculation annually with our EIA report. That's typically when our staff does it. And those numbers change. Now, what you're correct in what you're saying. If our peak goes down, we have to accommodate these systems that are out there. We're not going to say you got to curtail now because. So it's a risk the utility runs, and we have to make sure we ensure the safety and reliability of the system. In a perfect world, right, it's always expanding, and we're always additional growth. There's always additional opportunities. But we didn't see that in 2020 as an example. I would say the last probably 3 or 4 years, we've had kind of people doing LED lights, energy efficiency things, the solar farms themselves sheds load. So, yeah, it's something that we really have to watch and look at a lot of factors.
Okay. Any other questions from Councilman King?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I understand this was a Senate decision, a law decision, but help me understand. I think you alluded that Seaford has one customer that was exceeding, I guess, that metering, net metering, and it was getting compensation at the end of the year for that. And now the law was passed and they've done away with that. You know, if I was that person or persons, that would kind of be like a tough pill to swallow, you know, because I'm sure you would use those resources to help maintain the system. Mm-hmm. Is there any thinking or reasoning on why that law was passed, saying, hey, that option doesn't apply anymore, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's really, the two reasons are the fact that they are increasing the threshold up to 8%, the fact that they are allowing more installations to come into place, knowing that it puts more strain on each individual circuit. It's really a combination of that in terms of maintaining the reliability of the system in coordination with the fact that they do specifically state that the collection of those credits is to essentially offset the administrative cost and burden associated with running these programs. And so as a result of allowing more customers to be in the program, administrative costs go up, and so this is one way that it would compensate the utility for running these programs.
Because it seems like before this law was passed or was enacted, somebody could just go in and actually create or build a system, right? And they're not doing nothing but selling power back, and at the end of the year they're reaping big rewards, as we've kind of alluded to. So this will kind of put a stop to that, right? So
well, actually, the city of Seaford, so our policy was an initial installation could not be more than 100% of the forecasted load going forward. So that's why technically no customer, if it was exactly the way the application was received, meaning they had the exact same consumption characteristics and loads and everything, they would one for one produce exactly what they used. And so the fact that they are overproducing means either their load has gone down, in which case, I mean, it is a commercial account. So in that case, I mean, it's not significant. It's only maybe 10,000 kilowatt hours for the whole year in terms of what the credit is. And so, yeah, likely there was a significant change on their side in terms of consumption habits. So we shouldn't have seen it up until this point, but it just, things happen.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from council? All right, so this is a first reading, so this will come back at the next council meeting.
Yes,
Okay, and Mr. Sims, you're taking us through the number 2 on the agenda as well?
The number 2 is, I sort
What we've
of
already
jumped
talked
into
about.
it in the same
Yep.
part where they talk about the 20% limit for any given distribution circuit. So that's not going into the rules and regulations themselves, because the Delaware Code only says that it's up to the utility to determine what's safe for operational requirements. And so the city of Seaford, for the time being, is basically adopting the policy. It's because it's an unwritten policy in Delmarva as well. Like, they don't publish it.
All right, so you've already covered that.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, we'll need a motion on number 2 on the net metering policy, if there are no questions.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion to approve the statement of net metering policy and system saturation limits, document that will establish the limits per circuit or substation of customer-owned generation interconnection to ensure the reliability, safety, protection, power quality, and capacity of the city-owned electric distribution system as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman Coy. Is there a second?
Councilman King, I'll second that
We
motion.
have a second. Are any questions on the motion? If not, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Councilman King?
Aye.
Councilman Santos?
Aye.
Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
And Councilman Holland?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you so much for your
Yeah,
presentation.
welcome.
Appreciate it so
Mr.
much.
Sims. Thank you.
See you. All right, next we have the ordinance annexing the 6.09 acres. Are you,
Yes, sir.
city manager, walking us through that?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. So this evening is the ordinance number 2022-A1, and it's an ordinance annexing 6.090, a 6.090 acre parcel located on the northeast corner of Road 534, Herring Run Road, and Route 13A, Bridgeville Highway, Seaford, owned by Laborio Seaford LLC, and it's Sussex County Tax Map Number 331-5.00- or parcel 43.02. Just for reference, that is the parcel just directly behind the Lowe's. We have followed the process in our charter for annexation. This is the last step in the process. We've been through the public hearing. In your package, in board pack, you have the advertisement that was done. It has been to Office of State Planning. So should council decide to adopt this ordinance this evening, we would have the ordinance recorded at the Recorder of Deeds, and it would become an annexed parcel within the city of Seaford. So this is the last step in the process.
Okay, are there any questions in regards to annexing this property?
I have one.
Yes, sir.
Yep, and that's for Mr. Anderson, our city manager. We kind of talked a little bit about it in our liaison meeting. Can you talk about timelines and what the property owner maybe vision, or is there anything you can share with us around this property if we annex it in, what that kind of looks like?
Yes, sir, Councilman. So as you are aware and council is aware, the property owner who is investigating or trying to get this property annexed has proposed to annex this, and council is proposing to annex this commercially. That does fit into our comprehensive plan. In our discussions with the code department, our building official, myself, and the economic development director, the property owner doesn't have currently any concrete plans. He's discussed with us some commercial uses that are permitted in our zoning ordinance. We've talked about them at a high level. He has no concrete plans at this point. He has no timelines. He is a known developer to us. He has developed within the city before. I will say at our directors meeting, we did talk about the property, the condition of the property. So we're gonna get our code enforcement department out there. Our police department is aware that it's in their territory after this process. So hopefully, at least over the next few weeks to months, you'll see the property appearance improved.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make the motion to adopt ordinance 2022-A1, annexing a 6.090 acre parcel located at the northeast corner of Road 534, Herring Run Road, and Route 13A, Bridgeville Highway, Seaford, Delaware, 19973, owned by Laborio Seaford LLC, Sussex County Tax Map Parcel 331-5.00-43.02 as presented.
We have a motion from Councilman Holland. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Councilman McCoy seconds. Any questions on the motion? If not, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Councilman King?
Aye.
Councilman Santos?
Aye.
And Councilman Henderson.
Aye.
All right, unanimous. Thank you so much. It's great. All right, do we have any old business?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay, reminder of meetings?
So we just have a couple. Saturday, July 29th, 2022, outdoor movie night on the grass lot here behind City Hall starts at 8:30 p.m.
Do we know what movie's playing?
I do not. I apologize. I can get that sent to you.
Spider-Man?
Spider-Man. Thank you very much.
Okay.
One.
Correct date, wrong vision.
People want to know.
Spider-Man? There's only about a half a dozen.
There's a few. There's the cartoon and there's the others, yeah. Okay, and the other one that we have is the 2022 AFRAM Festival, Saturday, August 13th, 8 a.m. until 8 p.m., and this is at the Ross Station Event Center, so slightly different venue this year.
Right, this is their 25th anniversary.
That sounds right. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Oh, just wanted to make everybody aware, the governor was in town today to help fund the HELP initiative that we've been talking about here. I believe it was $2.5 million. Was that correct, Mrs. Newcomer? So that's Harold and Charlie that did the lights on Seaford. They're going to be doing jobs on, health on,
Merchant on?
safety on, merchant on. There's a lot of programs they're going to be working again. So
They're on it.
they're a fabulous group. They're well established. They know our community. They're going to do police chief on. Chief showed off his electric motorcycle today. That was good. It's always good to have the governor in your town and celebrate the good things that are going on. But the investment they're putting into this group is pretty significant, and they're excited about the impact they're going to have. So it was great to have the governor here in town, and that was at Love Inc. So they got to show off what they do there as well. So
And you were well represented by your mayor as MC of the event, so he left that out.
yeah. Okay. All right. We're going to go to committee reports. We'll start off with Administration IT. Councilman Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The following meetings that were met, that staff had were the DMAC special board meeting regarding bond financing. They met with the developer regarding the Ross Business Park project. They attended the quarterly golf course meeting and Wolford Street resident meeting. They participated in several interviews, and they've drafted the service truck bid documents for the IT report. They're waiting on the firewall for the command vehicle. They set up this cradle point and equipment in the truck to work with laptops. They've worked on migrating everybody to Office 365. That's what they're going to be using for new emails, and they're awaiting cameras. They've ordered cameras, and they're waiting on them right now. And all other business is routine.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next, we have Police and Fire. Councilman Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief John Wilson of the Seaford Volunteer Fire Department reports for up to date for the total for 2022. There have been 555 calls to date, fire calls, for an average of 2.6 per day. In July 22 so far, there are 78 calls, and that's an average of 3.1 calls per day. For EMS, there's a total of 2,291 calls for an average of 11.2 calls per day. And in July, so far there have been 317 calls for an average of 12.6 calls per day. So you can see we're above average for the month so far. I don't think there's any time of day that you don't hear a siren or something going on. They maintain a lot of responses. In-city fire responses were 278 and 1,309 for fire, and then EMS is 1,391 for a total of 1,676 calls. Out of the city is 185 calls for fire and 819 for EMS for a total of 1,004. In assists for other, for mutual aid for other departments, there was 56 calls in fire and 81 calls so far this year for a total, in EMS for a total of 137. There were some significant events during the period. Motorcycle versus bicycle crash that happened on the 20th of July. There was one patient flown to Christiana as a result of that. On 7/21, there were rescue calls that were handled due to the severe weather. And on the 23rd, there was a motor vehicle accident with entrapment on Seashore Highway. However, the patient self-extricated before the department's arrival. And on the 23rd, on North Street, there was a small fire in the basement of a church. All units are currently in service. And under training, they combine with Blades at Station 71 for training of vehicle rescue. On the 25th, there was a training at Seaford at Station 87, and then again, I think there was a demonstration out on the Willen Farm yesterday for the grain rescue class, and the next training will be in August 17th. They'll do box alarm drills. Pardon me. Under emergency medical services, there's a full-time employment posting that's active until August 12th. We have 2 applicants on file now. There's part-time employment that is still active. I mentioned previously that there's been a noticeable increase in call volume, and that's under EMS. So another reminder that the ambulance fund drive is still ongoing, and the department appreciates all those who take part in supporting the department. Under news and events, Seaford firefighters attended the Paratech University class for specialized rescue equipment at Georgetown Fire Company. And on the 15th, Station 87 and Station 72, which is Bridgeville, had a combined duty crew night with dinner and training. Rescue 87 went to Station 42, which is Carlisle or Milford, for training with Holmatro tools. Tanker 87 attended the Little Sprouts Daycare Block Party. Moving on to Seaford Police Department, Chief Kraft reports. He always has a very detailed report. I'll try to hit the highlights here. 2022 year-to-date calls are 5,213, and you'll see the distribution down throughout. In the period, there were 206 crimes noted, and you'll see the distribution there. 9 felonies, 40 misdemeanors, 40 violations, or 10 violations, 2 civil, and 145 other. Maintain a 90% clearance rate on those crimes. And under additional crime data below, there were a total of 14 complaints consisting of aggravated assault, fraud, and larceny. And that excludes shoplifting, which is, the chief maintains that a 43% clearance rate is actually above average for these types of crimes. Under drug complaints, there were 12 drug crimes, and you'll see the distribution there. You'll see 10 adult arrests and 2 prosecution decline. Under traffic, there were 233 traffic contacts, resulting in 61 citations and 6 warnings, which is down from previous periods. 1 DUI, 23 crashes in the period, 2 injury accidents. 6 of those were hit and runs. 1 was a bicycle, and the other was a motorcycle, which that happened in the same accident. And there were 2 alcohol-related crashes. However, they were not DUIs. You'll see down through here there were some of the significant events. By no means all the events that happened. However, there was some excellent police work that's been done throughout. But most notably, on the 24th, I'll call your attention to where Seaford police officers observed a juvenile suspect, 17 years old, who was wanted out of Fruitland for charges stemming from a shooting investigation. The suspect was initially observed riding a bike in the area of Market Street and King Street. Officers searched the area and located the suspect leaving the residence in the area of North Arch Street and Poplar Street. The suspect refused officers' commands to stop, dove through a screen porch, and a short foot pursuit ensued, ending in the suspect resisting arrest before being taken into custody. A search of the suspect revealed 50 bags of crack cocaine packaged for individual sale, 24 bags of heroin, and additional crack cocaine totaling 10.9 grams. The suspect was charged with resisting arrest, possession with intent to distribute Tier 2 quantities, possession with intent to distribute, possession of Tier 2 quantities, 2 counts of possession of drug paraphernalia, disorderly conduct, and related offenses. The suspect was arraigned at Justice Peace Court and committed to Stevenson on a secured bond. And I really appreciate, there was a lot of good police work. I don't have notes on the officers involved, but there were several officers involved that did excellent work in this, and I want to congratulate the department on that successful arrest. A significant event that the police attended and supported was the Unified Seaford Bible Camp at the Church of God in Nutter Park on Saturday the 23rd. And would like to call out Officer Palm. He attended a training on use of force. So that was instructor training, so that was an 80-hour course. And he will now be able to instruct the rest of the force on the use of force policy and methods, so that he, with this training, that qualifies him as an expert and an instructor now. And Sergeant Chambers attended Spanish Survival at the Delaware State Police Academy on the 12th. And I'm not sure what that is. Chief, could you elaborate on what Spanish Survival is?
It's teaching officers how to communicate the basics with individuals that speak Spanish.
Okay, so it's
Trying to get their name,
just
their date of
101.
basic
address.
communication with the Spanish-speaking population. So that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Councilman Holland with Codes, Parks, and Rec.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for Solid Parks and Recs. They are in the process of reviewing J-Ness Playground to create a plan for extensive repairs. And they have trimmed trees on Sound Highway Bridge and will coordinate with electric company for higher trimming. And they have prepped Williams Pond Park for baseball tournament and other park for weekend events. They have 13+ teams interested in the Men's Slow Pitch League, currently working on finding and schedule umpires. And they have over 150 kids registered for fall youth soccer and over 100 kids for youth flag football. And they have partnered and advertised for upcoming outdoor movie night on 7/29 at Market Street Grass Lot, 8:30 p.m. And we'll switch over to Code. Melanie Ridge has nearly completed the first 2 buildings. Merrifield 1 water and sewer installation is underway. And a permit has been issued for the 3rd building at East Park Business Center, and 7-Eleven is still anticipating opening the first week of August. And all the work is routine. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Councilman McCoy, Electric.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Had a few highlights since the last report regarding the crew. Nick Smart attended the last week of lineman training. They took down the Riverfest banners and put away the electric receptacles for vendors. And he hooked up the first 12 units in Melanie's Ridge. Regarding our director, had his standard director's meeting, council liaison meeting, and staff meeting. He planned the inventory order for scheduled projects and met with the general contractor for Melanie's Ridge. Over the course of the next few weeks, the plan is to work on the primary loop service to residents at River Place, continue working in Bel Air multifamily, continue changing the lights at Sussex, on Sussex Highway LED, and start working in Bel Air single-family residence section. Before I conclude my report, just a quick shout out to Mr. Bennett and the crew for the storm last week. It's pretty nasty around here. Crew came in full force and went out there and provided great service for our community, so always appreciated. And that's been my report.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Public Works, wastewater treatment, Councilman King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Report has been submitted in its entirety. I'm just going to hit some of the highlights. I will start with the Public Works Department. Work continues on the Route 13 sewer main project as well as the South Conwell Green Infrastructure Project. The team continues to work on leaf and limb pickup, and work continues on painting the curbs. The team continues to focus their attention on weed growth throughout our city, and a repair was done on a water service line on State Street. Interviews were conducted, and I'm excited to announce a new employee will be starting in the Public Works Department on August the 1st. I'm going to jump over to the wastewater treatment facility. Plant performance remains good. DNRAC annual compliance sampling took place on 7/21. The MS4 Tier 2 2022 draft comments were prepared and submitted. The facility did experience some high water flows due to the recent rainstorms. Congratulations goes out to Brian Murphy. He has accepted the position of wastewater technical coordinator, and he will start his new position on July 18th. Here's just a few of the projects that are going to be taking place over the next couple weeks. They're going to install 2-inch fire service lines at Bel Air, continue to paint curbs, keep the plant up and running with 0 violations, perform maintenance as needed, and prepare for DNRAC's annual inspection. And with that, Mr. Mayor, that concludes my report.
All right, thank you very much. Along with Councilman McCoy's thanks to the electric department, it really impacted everybody in the city, from the police out at every intersection they could man, to the fire company out, to the city office staff coming in to man the phones because everybody wanted to know when they could start cooking dinner again because it hit right at dinner time. Public Works, everybody pitched in and made it happen. So that's what makes living in a small town great, when you can see all your folks out there helping out. City manager answering the phone, so appreciate it. So with that, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion from Councilman McCoy, second from
Second it.
Councilman Santos with a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, unanimous. Thank you. Good night.